Hey guys, what is going on? My name is Frostify, and today we are going to be ranking every single Adobe program on a tier list. Now, before we get into it, I just want to let you guys know that every single Adobe program will not be featured in this episode. I figured that this is such a fun concept that I wanted to break it up and turn it into a video series. So for today, we're just going to focus on the very key basics and honestly programs that I am super familiar with. I also want to let you guys know that this is my personal opinion, and if you guys have a different take, please feel free to leave it down below in the comment section. I am so down for striking debate and just overall getting different perspectives on this kind of thing. But I realized that nobody ranked all these Adobe programs, and I'm sure we know as video editors, graphic designers, motion designers that there is some flaws in some of these programs. So without further ado, I think this is going to be a pretty fun series idea, so I'm going to go ahead and break it up into 3 different videos. Obviously, they'll be uploaded at different times, but today we are going to be focusing on the core necessities of Adobe. These are all going to be programs that you guys are pretty damn familiar with. So without further ado, let's go ahead and stop rambling and start striking the debate. Let's get into the tier list. Oh my God. My mustache is all messed up. Why didn't none of you tell me? All right, guys, we have all of our Adobe programs with a little hidden Camera Raw, which will be pretty interesting to judge. I'm super excited to get into this tier list and honestly just debrief each of these programs one by one. Yet again, guys, as you're watching, feel free to make your own list down below, and I will also give you access to this list as well if you want to tweet at me and give me your personal opinion on Adobe programs. But without further ado, let's get into the rankings. Starting off with Lightroom Classic. I've got to say, this is definitely a very nice kind of application to have on the go, especially since it's catered more for mobile users. However, it's very condensed and doesn't exactly give you as many options as Lightroom would. So for that, I'm honestly going to have to either put it at a B or a C, because Lightroom Classic is definitely a go-to in terms of accessibility on the go usage, but is very kind of condensed and not exactly, you know, intricate to the point of being a Lightroom level program. That one's an easy bet. I definitely enjoy Lightroom Classic, and it's definitely come in clutch kind of on the road when I'm editing photos, whether it be for, you know, merch stuff or other things like that. So definitely a cool thing to kind of like, you know, keep in mind. Coming in at the next program, we are going to be talking about Stock. Now, I'm going to completely be honest here. Adobe Stock has come in clutch so many times and is definitely reminiscent on Envato Elements. I'm not exactly sure which came first, but they are both fantastic options for doing things like gathering assets, gathering stock footage, or simply just gathering templates for your graphic design project. I've definitely not used Stock in a long time, since I'm definitely more an Envato Elements fan. However, Stock is definitely up there with the usage level and definitely up there with the kind of, you know, value you get when you purchase it. So with that being said, I'm gonna have to put Adobe Stock at a high A, because it is just it really comes in clutch when it comes to gathering assets and other things like that. And plus, it's reliable. Like, you can get things like Twitter mockups, post mockups, just normal mockups, get normal stocks. You can get loads of different things with Stock. Next up on the list is Adobe Rush. Now, Adobe Rush is actually a mobile editor and is definitely more catered towards the mobile audience, which definitely becomes very convenient when you're on the road and you are overall just, you know, traveling and you need something edited up really quickly. So for that, I'm going to have to either put it at a C tier or a D tier, because A, Rush does not have many options and definitely does not become powerful enough to over kind of like top Premiere Pro or After Effects or any of those programs you would use for editing on your laptop or your desktop. But when it comes down to getting a very simplified editor, and I do believe in fact it is free on the App Store, so I got to give it credit for being very affordable for what it does. However, it's just not enough to breach the top of the line programs like Premiere Pro and After Effects. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the mid tier, C tier. I absolutely love Rush, and I used to use it in the beginning of making content and stuff like that, and it can also be really good for making things like YouTube Shorts. However, it's just not really mainstream enough for me, and it definitely is not used enough in my personal opinion in order to overtop Premiere and After Effects, like I mentioned before. Next up on the list is Adobe Portfolio, and I have to say, Portfolio is definitely one of the best ways you can lay out your work on Adobe. Not only does it sync with things like Behance and other programs that allow you to showcase your work, but it's very affordable, and it's definitely a safe option to go towards when you are looking for a professional place to list your work. It's very easy to use, and in terms of a website builder and overall portfolio builder, it's very easy to come across and understand. So for that, I definitely have to give it extra brownie points, and it's very accessible to use, and it automatically formats with things like mobile devices, so you don't really have to worry about that on your end. And it even breaches a little bit higher of an accessibility point with allowing you to create custom pages and stuff. So not only can you have a page that displays all of your work, but you can have a page that, you know, says a lot about your brand, promotes your Discord servers, promotes anything graphic design related that you want to promote. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and put it above Lightroom Classic in B tier. What's holding it back from A tier, in my opinion, is the fact that there is not a lot more options that you can do with it. Obviously, it's very accessible and it's high up on the list, but overall, for a portfolio builder, this is definitely one you're going to want to look out for. Coming in with one of the biggest dogs on this list is Premiere Pro, what I am using to edit this video right now. Premiere Pro is definitely becoming a more industry standard editing software. Obviously, you've got Final Cut Pro and other amazing editing softwares that can get the job done just as well as Premiere, but when it comes to the Adobe suite, this is definitely going to be an editing software that you're going to want to keep an eye on overall. In terms of learning the program, it can become a little bit difficult, but as they say, you kind of get the Adobe universal effect. Once you use one program and learn it, it's very easy to kind of cater that knowledge to other programs and learn and branch off of that knowledge. Premiere Pro has definitely been probably one of the more loyal editing programs that I have stuck with because it's been so reliable and stuff like that. However, there is one thing that holds it down from being an S tier program, and that is crashing. I know what you're gonna say, and trust me, we have all been there. Premiere Pro is definitely a crash program and can be very difficult in syncing with Media Encoder, which is another one on the list if you do not export through Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro is very accessible with easing and allowing different keyframes on different things, and there is loads, and I mean loads of different options you can use with this program. From color grading to using different effects on your videos. This is definitely probably one of the most top of the line editing programs you can get, but sadly, because of its crashability and stuff like that, we are going to put it high A, keeping it away from the S tier. I may have a grudge with crashing, but I mean, who doesn't? Next up on the list is After Effects, another industry classic. I use After Effects a lot for things like promotional videos and announcement videos, things that require a lot of motion graphics. Rather than just transitions, I'm looking for things that can actually incorporate text effects and loads more. After Effects has a lot of different plugins that you can get from different creators around the industry, and with that, it makes it one of the more accessible applications on the list. I am gonna have to say the same thing with Premiere though about the crashing. It's very, very unfortunate, but at the same time, After Effects is definitely going to be one of the higher programs on the list. I think with the amount of diverse plugins you can get for both Premiere Pro and After Effects, these two combined definitely become one of the bigger, probably, you know, most iconic duos in the editing scene and the editing industry. And obviously it syncs with things like Media Encoder and stuff like that, which can get you a really, really cool image when you are rendering. You do need a hefty load in order to kind of run things in After Effects, so keep that in mind. But other than that, it's a phenomenal program, and to be completely real with you guys, I've been using it since day one for announcements and much more. So for that, I've got to put it at a high A tier for right about now. Coming in at the next program, it is going to be Bridge, which essentially is a file organizer and file handler. I have to say, Bridge has definitely not been used much on my end, but I have talked to a lot of designers and creatives who have used it and swear by its abilities. The only thing I can think of is when I'm going up to save my project and I accidentally open Bridge. God, that's just one of the weirdest feelings ever, isn't it? But I mean, with that aside, Bridge is definitely a really great place to locate files and get things organized, and definitely overtops File Explorer in a lot of different ways. So, I mean, with myself not knowing a lot about Bridge and just knowing the core fundamentals of it, I'm gonna have to put it at a high A tier right under Stock. Next up is Illustrator! Finally, one of my favorite programs to use when it comes in combination with Photoshop. Illustrator has loads, and I mean loads of options, whether or not you're vectorizing an image or creating patterns or simply just making normal graphics. Illustrator definitely has a wide range of features that you can use. I've used it several times to vectorize things like logos and different assets so they appear HD in graphics, which is definitely a massive help. And Illustrator is overall just a multi-use platform. You can use it for drawing, you can use it for vectorizing, you can use it for graphic design, you can use it for typography, you can use it for loads and loads of different graphics situations. So I think there's only one obvious answer here, and that is going to have to be an S tier program. I've never not met a graphic designer who doesn't use Photoshop in sync with Illustrator or literally just uses Illustrator alone. Illustrator is the king of vectorizing, logo design, and so much more. So for that, I have to put it in S tier, as it is probably one of the most utilized programs in the Adobe fields. Next up is Media Encoder. Oh boy, Media Encoder, what would I do without you? Media Encoder is a rendering software that you can connect with either Premiere Pro or After Effects to render out your videos more smoothly. And I have to say, with myself being a motion designer and needing those WebM kind of, plugins and H.264 compressions, and even animated GIFs to a certain extent, that's right, I pronounce it GIFs, please roast me in the comments. This is definitely a must-need if you are a motion designer or any type of kind of creative that uses After Effects and Premiere Pro a lot. Normally, when I'm editing videos in Premiere Pro, I render with kind of, just normal MP4. Normally, when I'm using Premiere Pro, I don't really find the need for Media Encoder, but it comes in clutch with working with motion design aspects. Things like lower thirds, things like, intros, stinger transitions, anything that also needs to be rendered transparent, Media Encoder's got your back. And if you guys haven't gotten your hands on Media Encoder, I highly recommend you do, because After Effects rendering software can only do so much in terms of rendering in QuickTime and AVI and all of that. Sometimes you really do need to render an MP4 or WebM. So for that, because of its really pristine use of utilization and kind of making it reliant on other programs, I definitely think Media Encoder has to be at a pretty high point on the list, because it gives you so many rendering options and just overall makes rendering easier. Obviously with the correct specs, of course. So I'm gonna have to put Media Encoder at the top of A tier. Although you can't really design in it, or you can't really make graphics in it, or do anything really remotely close to that, rendering is key, and Media Encoder makes it easier, so it's got to be up there on the list, in my personal opinion. Okie dokie, coming in at the next program, probably my most used. Honestly, if they had a day counter, there's probably thousands and thousands of days on this program on document for myself, but Photoshop. Photoshop is absolutely industry standard at this point. Photoshop can be used for marking down photos, doing photo manipulation, doing photo compositing, and even going to the extent of making things like headers and other graphical assets that you would see in the gaming industry or the normal industry. And when I say normal industry, I mean, things like retail or film, other things like that. Photoshop also has a wide range of plugins that you could use, but Photoshop, in my personal opinion, is probably one of the most utilized programs in the industry. You've got loads of access to things like layer styles, masking tools, move tools, fonts. There is a lot of things that you can do with Photoshop, and to be completely honest, if you are a graphic designer right now working kind of in a gray area with free apps on a mobile device or free apps on a desktop, I highly recommend raking in a little bit of cash and getting yourself Photoshop, because not only is it one of the easier programs to use and learn over time, but it is very flexible and very, very easy to kind of, format your stuff when you need it and stuff like that. However, there is a catch. Remember earlier how I talked about After Effects and Premiere Pro crashing? Photoshop's got it pretty bad too. So make sure you're clicking Control S, because if you do not, boy, it might hit you pretty hard. I know I might get a little bit of flag for this one, but to be completely honest with you, I'm either going to put Photoshop at the highest tier on tier A or at S tier. And to be completely honest, I am kind of leaning towards top of A tier. Obviously, with Photoshop being so diverse and stuff like that, it's got to be recognized as one of the most used, but also one of the most difficult to use, in my personal opinion. All right, guys, hot take, but Figma is the next application. If you guys did not know, Adobe did acquire Figma and bought them out. I know for a fact that the Figma owners still kind of have, some control, but with it being housed under Adobe, I am officially counting it as an Adobe program. Figma is amazing. I do not even know where to begin with this program. You could do loads of different things, from animations to UI design to pitch decks to email design to loads and loads of different kind of, situations. Figma is by far better than Photoshop and Illustrator combined, as everything can be vectorized and you can even transfer stuff from Illustrator to a Figma file. I definitely think that is something to keep in mind, especially since Figma is utilized very efficiently. Not to mention that you get 3 projects with it for free, and it can be used on the web. So you don't even have to download the application. And not to mention, Figma also comes with its own mood boarding software called FigJam. Figma has definitely come in clutch with loads of different projects that I have had to do, such as revamping my Discord server or doing things for work. I highly recommend checking out this application if you are going to get deep into the UI world or simply just want to investigate graphic design through different eyes. Figma is very accessible and very easy to use, and honestly has been one of the easiest programs to kind of develop into kind of, you know, the skill gap bar, if that's what you want to call it. And with it being accessible on the web, you can also use it on mobile devices, and it even has its own app now. So definitely check it out. You can even, as a matter of fact, work on the same document with teammates, which is absolutely cool. And there's even a high five feature. What application can do that? I'll tell you one thing, it's not Photoshop. So with that being said, Figma, for me at least, is definitely an S tier program. I would even put it right above Illustrator, especially since the two kind of coincide and work together as one. Coming in next on the list is probably one of the best portfolio builders you can get your hands on, absolutely free and works on the web, and that is Behance. Not only is Behance a great place to post your work, but it is a great place to gather inspiration and even get rewards on your projects if you really hit a certain criteria. Behance for me has been the home of the majority of my work since I started graphic design, and is honestly a guaranteed professional way to lay out your work. There's loads of different things you can do with your project. You can put in text, images, GIFs, simple image galleries. The possibilities are endless when you are actually utilizing this to showcase your work to clients. It has an amazing section to really write about you and kind of list your work experience, and it even has a resume builder, which is super fantastic. Not a lot of people know that, but if you actually put your work experience into Behance, it will mock up a free resume look for you, and you can print it out and use it for things like applying for jobs. And speaking of jobs, it also has a job picking section. Behance is by far probably one of the biggest homes to graphic design in the industry, and there's not been a graphic designer yet that I have come across that hasn't used Behance at least once in the creative journey. And with it being free, it makes it one of the most accessible portfolio builders you can probably find on the market or even on the internet as of now. So for Behance, I'm definitely going to have to put it in S tier. A lot of you guys are probably thinking like, why would you put it in S tier? It's literally a portfolio builder. I want you guys to ask yourselves, do you use Behance right now? And if you don't, do you get inspiration from it? And if the answer is yes, it makes all the sense. Coming in at the next program, we have Adobe Acrobat. Now, this PDF reader, editor, whatever you guys want to really call it, has been so absolutely phenomenal with signing documents and overviewing contracts and stuff like that. If you guys have ever heard of DocuSign, Adobe Acrobat actually has a whole signature kind of process thing built into it. You can edit PDFs, and you could also add signature briefs for your clients to sign. And for me personally, before I actually started working full-time in the industry and I was taking on client work, this was an absolute must-have. Building up those client contracts and being able to kind of, you know, send them the contracts and have them digitally sign it and then have it back in my hands through email and putting it in a file is definitely something that is very, very kind of like looked over. I think that Adobe Acrobat is extremely underrated, and although people may not use it all the time to use things like, you know, signatures or whatever the case is, it's definitely become one of the most useful tools I've used as a graphic designer. Acrobat is definitely useful for things like sending out release forms, signing contracts, reviewing contracts, and all of the above. So I'm gonna have to give it a little bit of love in B tier. Alrighty, coming in at the last and final kind of application or plugin we are going to be reviewing for this episode, it is going to be Camera Raw filter. If you guys do not know what Camera Raw filter is, it is essentially a feature in Photoshop that is built in that allows you to have full control over things like color corrections and final adjustments. Camera Raw could definitely flip a design 180 degrees depending on how you use it because of all of the diverse color effects and final effects that you can do with this feature. So with that being said, with Camera Raw being super diverse in terms of controls and stuff like that, I know I personally have used it in loads and loads of my designs. I'm gonna have to put it at a high A tier right behind Bridge. Alrighty guys, this is where we are leaving off for the first episode of this little tier list series that I am doing. In the next episode, we will be going over even more Adobe programs such as InDesign and a lot of other ones, honestly. But I want to get your guys' opinions because I am sure there are some 2 cents that you guys want to add. So if you want to let me know what your personal opinion is, or if you want to do this tier list by yourself, I will leave a link down below in the description for you guys to attempt it. What do you guys personally think of Adobe programs, and what are your personal favorites? Let me know down below in the comment section. I'm super intrigued to kind of know what your guys' 2 cents are and which programs you use the most, and honestly, what are S tier programs to you guys? But without further ado, this has been a really fun video, and I cannot wait to do more eventually. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next Friday with a brand new YouTube video. Peace out.